You're listening to the Racer to Racer podcast presented by Race 92. Race 92 is a vintage-inspired racing apparel brand specializing in celebrating vintage race culture and adapting to motorsports today. Check out race92.com for all your racing merchandise needs. I'm your co-host, Aaron McAtee. Our other co-host, you may have seen walking out of great clips with a big old smile on his face. You've probably seen him at a dirt track. He is the one and only Scott Bowie.
Hello, Aaron.
How's it going?
Good, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, first off, thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit like and subscribe. And also, please check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and anywhere where podcasts can be found. We appreciate all the support. So, our episode today was a really cool one. Jack Arute, who obviously has been in racing broadcasting for a very long time. I don't know I forget when he actually got to start, but he's been around for a long time and he's done many other sports as well. So, a lot of people know him as the pit road analyst or whatever, pit reporter. So really cool to talk to him. Definitely really good stories. And he has a podcast. So definitely check that out. I think it's called Wind Tunnel with Jack Arute.
Wind Tunnel. Yeah, it's great.
So,
great.
Yeah. So he's definitely a professional. And I've noticed it's always easier to talk to people that basically do this for a living. I mean, he does, he's in this for a living. So, great guy and, really cool to talk to him.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I knew about Jack through seeing him just do the pit road thing. I didn't realize his connection to USAC racing and how much connection his family had to owning racetracks and and how he started working at his dad's track, but it was independently of his dad. It was pretty interesting story, and just such a likable guy. And like you mentioned, Wind Tunnel is a great podcast, great interview show. So please go check that out.
Absolutely. And also wanted to mention, make sure you check out racercollect.com. If you haven't, Patrick Patton, great guy, great friend of the show. We've had him on a couple times, and he has a great website selling racing memorabilia, and a lot of stuff comes direct from the driver, so it's authentic. So definitely check them out. And actually, he was actually on Jack Arute's podcast, I think a few months ago. He met Jack, I think, in Nashville, and this is how great of a guy Jack is. And he was telling Jack what he's doing, and Jack was like, "Man, that's great. Why don't you come on the show and talk about it?" So he had him on. I think he had him on with Hinchcliffe, and they talked about it.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that. I think that's great too, and I think Racer Collect has a great business model. And please, if anybody's in the market looking for auto racing related memorabilia, souvenirs, whatever you want to call it, check him out. It's all authentic.
Absolutely. And he's helped us get a couple of our guests. One we're interviewing this week. And something we mentioned last week was I think one of the first 2 weeks in April, we're doing a special, I think it may be sprung out in 2 weeks, like Women Week in Racing, where we're going to have 5 or 6 interviews with different women involved in racing. And it's really a wide variety of racing as well. So it's not just all drivers. There's a little bit of everything. So I think everyone will enjoy that, and, just trying to change it up a little bit.
Yeah, I agreed. And I'm looking forward to getting that released. And thanks to your hard work, and thanks to um, people like Patrick who helped us get some of the guests, and just anybody who helped out. We really appreciate it.
Yep. And we have a couple other really great ones. And actually next week we're releasing another good friend of the show. Yeah.
The man, David Land.
David Effin Land.
David Effin Land. He is blowing up the YouTube world of IndyCar racing and sports car racing. I think this weekend he was in both Sebring and went to Texas. He's a young person who's worked very hard to be able to live his dream, and man, go get him. He's doing a heck of a job.
So before we started this podcast, you were familiar with David Land.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Did you ever dream you would get to talk to David Land for 2 hours?
It was an absolute dream. I couldn't believe it. Of all the encounters I've had in my life, it was my one shining moment.
You have a star on the refrigerator, the David Lane encounter,
That's right.
February or January, whatever it was, 2022.
Right. He no, great dude, man. I mean, I realize he's a little controversial. Some people don't like him. I think it's just because he tells things the way he sees it. And sometimes he may be harsh in the things he says, and he maybe says the wrong thing. Um, but he loves the sport. He gives everything he
Mhm.
has to it, and he's reaping those rewards. So, I mean, hats off.
Yeah, and everyone's allowed to have their own opinion. I mean, it is a free country, so there's nothing wrong with it. And like I said, whenever you have a big following like he has, I mean, he's up to like 75,000 subscribers the last I looked. You're not going to make, all, and there's more than that even watching his videos. You're not going to make all the 100,000 people who are watching your videos happy.
No, not at all. I mean, there's just no way.
Yeah.
You're going to strike a wrong chord with someone, and hey, that's part of it. I think he's learned to accept that, and he's really starting to become accepted into. You can kind of tell it. He's getting kind of scoops, but he
Yeah.
sits on the stories. He isn't throwing people under the bus. He's gaining people's trust, and Marshall Pruitt obviously is amazing what he does, and there's some others that are amazing what they do. But the sport needs the David Land as well, and it's a good thing he's there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really cool seeing him grow. So obviously we have the David Lane collection through Race 92, which I'm obviously involved with. And when we started with him, I think he was just around 50,000 subscribers. And since then he's gained, I think like 25,000. So it's really cool kind of seeing him grow. And yeah, he's definitely going to get to 100,000, maybe by the end of the year. I don't know, but I definitely be a cool moment for him, I'm sure.
But yeah, he's the one good thing for David, or cool thing for David. I mean, he's really and I don't mean this in a negative way. He's like a racing nerd. Like he can tell you about this car and this livery and all these different things that just I think brings a lot to it. Like he can easily spot the years of a car and kind of the situation and the make and stuff like that. So I think that he brings a real authenticity, although he never worked on a team really, or he never drove. He still
But
has. I mean,
his dad was involved.
his dad definitely was involved, but he just kind of brings a bit of authenticity to it.
Hmm.
Like
Oh yeah.
he's not just some guy shooting from the hip.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the beauty behind it. And he eats, sleeps, and drinks racing. So
Yeah, agreed.
it's great to see passionate people. So this week in racing, there's a few things. So first off, IndyCar race. I thought it was a pretty good race at Texas Motor Speedway. Joseph
I
Newgarden
thought it was
gets
a great
Scott
race.
McLaughlin. Yeah, so Joseph passes Scott basically the last possible second. A lot of surprises in the race. Jimmy Johnson, I think, really impressed a lot of people, including myself. And I mean, I expected it. I mean, he finished, I think, sixth.
He ran six. I mean, to be fair, I mean, there was guys like and nothing against me like Ed Carpenter and Derek Daly, Connor Daly.
Yeah.
Yeah, not Derek. Connor Daly, who ran behind him.
He
Um,
passed
you
Scott
know,
Dixon, but
he
I think
passed
Dixon
Dixon.
ended up,
Dixon got
yeah.
back right at the end. I mean, he passed Pagano. I mean,
He was making
I mean,
some difficult passes.
yeah, he had a excellent day, and great for him, man. I mean, he's kind of behind the scenes. I shouldn't even say behind the scenes, but people kind of slinging a few arrows at him, and man, today he was able to really show his, that all this has been worth it for him. It's not a win. It's not what his ultimate goal is, but he'll take a six. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, by far his greatest finish in IndyCar, and he's won several races at Texas. I think like five, right? In
I
NASCAR,
think it was seven. I thought it was like something
maybe
like
more.
seven,
Where is that the
something
one
like
where they
that.
were going to rename the Victory Circle to like Jimmy Johnson Victory Circle? Or
Maybe. I
I
mean, he
swore
won.
they said that at one point.
I'm pretty sure he's won more than five, but
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
So they did have a stat at the beginning of the race, and I think they said that he has driven 11,000 laps around Texas Motor Speedway.
Yeah, what was they said the first 4 drivers in the field at the time, you'd have to add all 4 of them up together to come close to his number or exceed his number.
So obviously different type of car, but he still has experience around Texas Motor Speedway. So that kind of makes, I mean, so Indianapolis 500. I think I don't know if he'll win the race, but I think he's definitely going to be competitive because he has a lot of experience around that track as well.
Well, I mean, it sure bodes well for him.
Yeah,
He's with Chip Ganassi Racing, super strong team.
he's
Odd,
won at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway 4 times, right?
yeah, and odd day. Me mentioning Chip Ganassi Racing, odd day for Alex Palou. Not a great day. He was
No.
not. They were not very fast all day. Scott Dixon was off too. I mean, really, in a lot of ways, Jimmy was the. Even though he finished behind Scott, Jimmy was the kind of the star of the team today.
Right. Yeah. Well, definitely really cool because, like you said, there has been a lot of, negativity on Instagram, on Facebook. I remember last year Jimmy was commenting on some of it. It was kind of interesting because someone said something about like, can't believe a 7-time champion of NASCAR is, lucky to finish, top 20 or whatever. And he was like, yeah, I'm just trying something out of my comfort zone.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Um, yeah. So great job by him. Obviously, Joseph Newgarden, great last lap pass. That was the 21st race at Texas that where the winner won by less than a second.
wow. Yeah, but I know,
Yeah.
remember there's a couple Texas races where there really wasn't a lot of passing, and I thought this race was pretty good. I really did.
Yeah. So they went in. They did that late day practice yesterday to try to add some rubber and increase the grip somewhat, and it helped obviously a little, enough to be able to widen the track out a little bit. So unfortunately, that's something that's got to be addressed one way or another. If they keep going back to Texas, the crowd was a little light again today, although it's better than I thought it was going to be. I sure hate to lose Texas. I think Texas
Yeah,
has
it's
gotten a bad
iconic.
rap for whatever reason, and I think, to be honest with you, I think some problems with the Cup cars in the past led them to make some decisions like putting the PJ1 down that affected the racing as a whole. And I think in an effort to fix something, they broke it even worse. And now they got to get back to where they were.
Right, I definitely think that it's an iconic track for IndyCar racing, and I really enjoyed when they used to race on Saturday night,
Yeah, right.
and
Uh,
it's just
I,
not the
I like
same. But
today. I like a day race though too, and I thought today was a great event. Man, I feel like I say this a lot about IndyCar. The man, it just the racing's great. Just where are the people? You know.
right,
But you go through. I think David Malukas was the highest finishing rookie. I don't think too many rookies finished though. I think Callum Ilott finished, but he was down the running order and he was actually part of the finish. He was running pretty slow and it allowed everybody to bunch up. Nothing against Callum, just how it was. Uh, then you got Devlin DeFrancesco, who had an adventurous day, and I definitely know your opinion on it. I know you weren't happy with with his performance today. Like 99% of the people weren't. I felt like that move into three was wrong.
right.
I thought that was a terrible idea. I know what he was trying to do. He thought he was going to get by him and be able to jump back up in front before he got into the corner. He just didn't know how to judge his distance, and he missed. And then when he dropped the left sides off below the white line and kind of got in the flat, it was over. All those cars are crashed, at that point. Um, the car wiggled. He got in the Sato. Well, I don't know what to tell people on that one. Was a kind of a racing incident. I know the car wiggled again. Kyle Kirkwood, who had an amazing run going. I feel terrible for him. I'm wearing a Foyt shirt in honor of he and Hildebrand running 1-2 at one point in that race. I really felt like that was it was good to see for Foyt Racing. But Carwiggle Kirkwood takes and I guess kind of moves to try to give him some room, and he got up in that PJ1 and stepped out on him, crashed. Again, to me that's a racing deal. But that going into 3 was definitely a bad idea. I know Graham Rahal talked to him. According to what they were saying on TV, Francesco apologized essentially when he was talking to the peak on Peacock, which again I thought that was great. The after race on Peacock, excellent. But he just made a mistake. He's a young race car driver doing what young race car drivers do. They make mistakes.
Rinus VK made a pretty big mistake as well at his first year at Texas. So,
well, in as great a driver as I think Rinus VK is, he made a big mistake last year at Speedway in that practice, that opening practice. He dropped her down and dropped the left sides off, and it spun. And it happens. I mean, unfortunately, it happens. And it tears up equipment, and you do put risk at people getting hurt. I get all of that. Young race car drivers are going to make mistakes, man. They're just not going to be perfect. And I see older race car drivers make a lot of mistakes too. So,
oh, absolutely. Only other racing news I think we have is Charles Leclerc. I don't know how to say the names. I do apologize. Wins Formula One race in Bahrain.
right.
Carlos Sainz Jr. Number 2. So Ferrari 1-2 in the race. Lewis Hamilton 3rd. But I think one of the stories, George Russell, his first race with Mercedes. Well, actually, technically it's the second race.
Right.
He's still in for Hamilton, but his first of the season. He finishes 4th. So, definitely good run for him. But I think really the story of the race is Kevin Magnussen finishing 5th.
Yeah, what a great
Haas.
day. And Mick Schumacher just missing points, run 11th.
Yeah.
But yeah, Magnussen.
And he just got put in that car, what, like 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, Magnussen with just an excellent day. I imagine the people at Haas can't be,
and they had a rough go there for a while. I mean, a couple weeks ago, it was looking rough for them because I know they had some issues getting their car shipped over. And then obviously the deal with Maspin, however you say his last name. Obviously they lost the Russian sponsorship for obvious reasons. And I think they didn't know what was going to happen, but obviously, things are going the right direction for them. So that's definitely good to see.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just, man, finally an American F1 team running good, feels good. Glad to see it. It's not American drivers, but I really like both the drivers they have. I like Magnussen and I like Mick Schumacher. So great for them. Sebastian Vettel was running second. When I turned it off to watch the IndyCar race, he was complaining about his steering. It was under yellow. Obviously, something happened. I assume it was with the steering, and he dropped out. Lewis Hamilton and Russell, to be honest, the entire time I watched, were not part of the fight. But, I mean, a bad day for Mercedes is 3rd and 4th. McLaren's who had really the tough day all around. McLaren had a bad day in Bahrain, and then they had a bad day in Texas when they, started on the pole and just, issues with both cars and tough day. I'm sure Zach Brown's going to chalk this one up to just a bad day in racing and try to move on down the road. But hey, we forgot to mention Santino Ferrucci.
Yeah.
What an amazing story. He moved to Texas in the off season, living in Texas, just hanging out the track. Unfortunately, Jack Harvey has a crash. They thought he was going to be clear. Last night, he said he was at dinner. They call him and says, "Hey, we don't know what's going on. Do you have any stuff around here?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, I live 35 minutes away." So they call him next day. or they tell him to meet be at the track next day, see if they need him. He shows up. Unfortunately, Jack can't race. They give him Jack's suit, and he goes out and runs top 10. I mean, you can like Santino or not like Santino. The guy is a gasser, hell of a driver. Uh, he deserves to be in the sport. Whether there's a place for him, I don't know, but he deserves to be there.
Absolutely, definitely very impressive. And I don't remember when this happened, but I think it was last week. So I don't think we talked about it. Colton Herta and the McLaren deal.
Yes, I forgot all about that. So I have no idea how that's going to play out. And then all of a sudden, Pato Award is now like halfway a free agent. I don't. I mean, I haven't really studied it. I haven't looked at it, which I find amazing because Pato's again another excellent race car driver.
Well, I understand he was obviously, I think obviously he was a little upset about the situation, which I get. I mean, he was worked his whole career to really be in Formula One, and I think he was promised some opportunities from McLaren. He tested a Formula One car because he got his first win, and then they just kind of came out with, "Oh yeah, our development driver's Colton Herta, your rival in
Right.
IndyCar." So I think
Right.
he was just like, "Yeah, I'm done with the team," but I mean, I get it to a degree, but that's also just kind of part of the sport.
It's a cutthroat sport. Sad to say, it's just it's cutthroat, and that I after we talked about Drive to Survive last week, I broke down and watched last year's season. And if you take anything from it, again, you just, I mean, honestly, you're as good as your last race. You're actually as good as your last turn lap.
Right.
Um, and it's a hard business, man. It's a, you know, Botas basically helps them win, or I shouldn't say it. Botas basically secured them constructors title last year,
Mhm.
by being the ultimate team player. And then within a week, he's let go. I mean,
Right,
you
because
know,
he was running the one race. I don't know if it's the same one he was running second, and he was gaining on Hamilton. They said hold your position, right?
well, it was either that or they let Hamilton by. I don't remember which. I watched
Yeah,
so many
one
of
or
them.
the
I
other,
don't.
right?
I don't even remember exactly what happened. And he just was the absolute team player. But I would say that's what led him to his current ride. And maybe in his current situation, he's gonna be able to go for wins when they're ready to win. So,
And there's a similar situation in IndyCar at St. Pete with I think Jimmy Johnson was helping Palou, right?
well, yeah, he was definitely holding up.
No.
McLaughlin trying to let Alex close in on him. It just he couldn't do it. And Scott McLaughlin, hey man, shout out to that guy. What a day today as well. That's a heartbreaker way of losing, but he is showing that he is fully arrived.
Oh yeah, I mean, what a great start to the year. I mean, almost won the first race, almost won the second. So he's definitely, I think he'll definitely win some more races this year for sure.
Right. And little note to Roger Penske, next time you're handing out $100 bills, let me know. I'll show up. You can hand some to me. He because he was handing out $100 bills to Joseph Newgarden for winning the 600th race, so he gave him $600.
I didn't see that part. That's
Oh,
funny.
you didn't see that?
No,
Yeah, Big Roger's passing out hundos there.
Jim Irsay used to pass out $100 bills at Colts camp.
Yeah, he would put him on the well, games he would put him on the footballs and throw them in the crowd.
Oh, that's funny. Definitely needed to go to those, right?
That's right.
Well, is there anything else we missed?
I don't have anything. It was a great weekend of racing. IndyCar again showed itself well. Just hopefully the fans will turn out to watch it.
Yep, and I hope everyone enjoys Jack Arute interview. Definitely was a great interview. Really enjoyed it. We recorded it back in January around the Chili Bowl time. It was the same, I think, that weekend or whatever.
Yeah, it was. It was that same week for Chili Bowl. Um, what a great guy, nice guy, fun to talk to. Like you said, stone cold professional, but extremely knowledgeable. Man, he'd be a ton of fun to hang out with.
And very passionate about the sport for sure.
Extremely passionate.
Yeah, definitely check out his podcast. Like we said, Wind Tunnel with Jack Arute. Definitely a great listen.
It is. Yeah, it's everything you'd expect from Jack Arute.
Yep. Well, I hope everyone has a great week and tune in next week for David Effin Land.
That's right. Everybody take care. Have a wonderful week.
Our guest today is a former auto racing pit reporter for ESPN and ABC. He currently hosts shows on Sirius XM and hosts Jack Arute's Wind Tunnel podcast presented by Advanced Auto Parts. We are joined by Jack Arute. Jack, it's an absolute honor. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's my pleasure, guys. Anytime a group of people can get together and talk auto racing, I'm all in.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've watched auto racing my whole life, and obviously, so I'm very familiar with you, and I've watched you on TV for many years. So, like I said, it's just kind of surreal, and just really cool to be talking to you.
Look, that's a very kind way of saying, you know what? You're old, Jack. You've been around, Jack. I get it, but hey,
right.
I'm probably twice your age, my friend, but that's all right too.
Right, and I'm sure people tell you that all the time that they've watched you on TV for years.
Actually, quite a few do, and in all honesty, it's kind of humbling in a lot of ways because guys like me, Mike Joy, Dave Moody, we've been at this for a very long time. We were instilled with the passion for motorsports when we were kids, showing up at short tracks where we grew up, and as we all three of us say, we've never had to work a day in our lives because we've been very fortunate. Our whole career path has taken us right down the middle of the fairway in something that we absolutely enjoy and would probably do if they didn't send us a check. No, wait a minute. Did I say that? Don't tell anybody that.
Yeah, like we've talked to Paul. Sorry, Scott.
Go ahead. Hey, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like we've talked to Paul Page, and he's somebody who's just so passionate about the sport, and you see him at the track whether he's working or not.
Well, Aaron, the bottom line, as I say, is there's and this is one of the. We just lost a great guy in John Madden over on the NFL side, and John Madden adhered to the same mission statement that the Paul Pages of the world do, and that's that we don't have a job. We actually just to try and Jim McKay taught me this so many years ago when I first got started at ABC. He came to me and God only knows why he took a liking to me, but he did. And he says, you know what, Jack, you've got a bright career ahead of you, but don't let anybody change what you do. And I was a little confused. And I said, well, what do you mean, Mr. McKay? Because I did refer to him that way, at least in the first year. And he said, you are someone that people can believe. And if you can just imagine yourself when you're looking in that camera, just like you're sitting on a couch with 3 or 4 of your buddies and just talk about that you love, it'll be successful. And, that was, I think, really terrific advice. And I think that's what I've tried to adhere to for over 50 years. I think Paul certainly, has lived it to its fullest. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves that, unfortunately, I'm not sure that the industry rewards that as much as it once did. I think there's a lot of people out here that are, trying to make a name for themselves. They're more concerned about what's the catchphrase that I can use to have people talk about me, or how can I be first? Don't let the truth get in the way of the story. I just want to be first with it. I know I must sound like a crusty old curmudgeon, but along the way, a lot of what I call the classical things that you are taught have given way to the expeditious nature of the social media.
That is very interesting that you brought that up because this is a conversation Aaron and I have all the time. The reason why I do this show, and I don't want to speak for Aaron, I want people's stories. I'm not going to put you, I'm going to tell us, like, if there's something that happened, if it's the truth, I'll say it. But I'm not out there. First of all, I'm not a reporter. Let me get that straight right away. But I'm not out here to be the guy who breaks the story or be the guy who embarrasses someone or a hot take guy or something like that. If you want that, there's plenty of people who do that. I'm not that guy.
Look, Steve, you're spot on. First of all, I celebrate the fact that you're not a reporter. The other thing that I'm proud to say is I'm not a journalist. Okay, those definitions have changed so much from when I started in this business that I don't want to be, associated with those terms. Am I a storyteller? I've made my living telling stories. Sometimes they've been simple stories, and I'm proud of the fact that there's an entire generation that, has finally had the light bulb go on and understood the terminology of stagger and how with a styrofoam coffee cup. Other times, when we talk about abrasive racetracks, makes me feel so good inside when I see one of today's pit reporters, grabbing out the chunk of cheddar cheese and scraping it up against the grater to talk about the way this particular track eats tires. And I don't think we do this enough, the compelling stories. I love doing Sirius XM NASCAR radio because it allows me to stay in touch and share those type of stories. I think it's great. All right. Yeah. All right. You put 2 turns of wedge in the rear and, you change the tire pressure. I don't care. All right. What I do care is the saga of Kyle Larson, who, because he made a stupid mistake, almost saw his career come to an end. Then it was resurrected by somebody that absolutely believed in his sincerity and regret for doing something stupid. And that was Rick Hendrick. And what a gamble that was. That to me is the story. And yet, when I tell that story and marvel at it, there are the trolls on the social media that say, move off of that, and they start throwing names. Well, you know what? You get to a point in your career, and I heard my predecessors say this, and I didn't understand it, to where you've been at it so long, you really don't care what other people think anymore. You know what's right. And I just finished we launched my podcast, the second season on the 2nd of February. And on the 9th of February in episode 2, I have a sit down with Daryl Waltrip. And Daryl and I go back almost 50 years. And you want to tune in because he's like me. He says what's on his mind. It's gotten him throughout his career in trouble. But the great line that he shared, he goes, he says, all that time that you and I spent together at Junior Johnson's, I finally have in old age figured it out. I've spent my life being a contrarian. This is what Daryl said. He says, and I realized that you're a contrarian too. And instead of us feeling bad about it, we stood up and congratulated each other, because where have all the contrarians gone? Where have all the people with curiosity gone? I don't know. Maybe they're stuck on Facebook or Instagram, or they're doing TikToks. I don't know.
I read this thing one time, and of course we all know how popular Disney is, right? And Disney's massive. And there was a study. Of course, they study everything there, and they said that 80% of the people that walk in those parks turn right, and 20% turn left. And I tried to be part of that 20%. You know what I'm saying? I don't always want to follow the herd, and the herd's right sometimes, and a lot of times it's not. And you were talking about Daryl Waltrip. It's so funny is the generations today kind of see him as like the Fox TV guy or whatever channel he worked for, and boogity boogity boogity. They don't know when they called him Jaws, and he would say what he thought was, when he would call out what he thought was wrong, or where he thought he was right. And he is getting back to that now.
Well, he's not the only one though. That's what we're seeing is we got away from it in the industry because of the fact that, unlike a lot of sports, professional sports, the professional athletes are dependent. Okay. They're more dependent on their corporate partnerships than ever before. You can have an abundance of talent, but you damn well better bring at least a golden briefcase with some business plans in it if you hope to be able to pursue up the ladder, whether it's IndyCar, NASCAR, IMSA, you name it, because it's always been entwined in our sport. Well, when you have that and you have to satisfy those folks, they play it close to the vest. But there are still people out there that aren't afraid to speak their mind. Just this week, Kevin Harvick, very outspoken, sitting down and trying to take us behind the curtain of the decision by SHR to hire Ryan Preece. And what he also revealed, which a lot of us on the inside knew, is KHI, his management firm. Well, Ryan Preece is one of his clients. So it was a confluence of concepts and ideas. But then no sooner did they announce the hiring of Ryan than they also, just less than 48 hours later, Eric Almirola announces that he's leaving. That was all part of Kevin Harvick's discussion, but where he really pulled a Daryl Waltrip, as far as I'm concerned, he challenged NASCAR as it applies to this LA Memorial Coliseum Busch-like clash and saying, look, doesn't matter what the outcome is or what kind of race takes place. It's the fact that NASCAR is presenting an event and they're willing to gamble. He said, but let's not lose sight of something that this opens the door to. And I spent a lot of time on the front stretch this morning talking about this. Kevin's come up with this plan and said, look, why not add or take one of our current NASCAR invitational events and offer it up to deserving short tracks across the country. And he said, look, I understand, most of them probably don't have the infrastructure that's necessary to host a cup, even an invitational event. Infield care, medical facilities, safer barrier, not even grandstands, because Kevin quickly discounted that. He said one of the great things we learned when we watched the SRX on CBS last summer is it doesn't matter whether you've got seats for 25,000, 50,000, or in the case of SRX, between 12 and 18,000. When they're hanging off the rafters, that says and transmits a visual that this is a big event. But here's what he came up with, guys, that I absolutely found fascinating. He says, go and notify a deserving NASCAR Advanced Auto Parts Weekly Racing Series track. You know what? 3 years from now, we're going to hold an invitational event at your track. Here's the punch list of infrastructure improvements you need to make that we are going to pay for. And get ahead of the curve and do it. Well, when you look, I'm conservatively estimating, they say just the pavement operation alone for that 2-day, 1 weekend event before the Super Bowl at the LA Memorial Coliseum, over $1 million. All right, take that $1 million, add another $1 million in a lot of the pre-work that had to be done, architecturally, permits, etc. I'm being conservative, saying $2 million. What do you think would happen if you were able to give to a deserving short track saying, hey, in 2 years, you have to do this. We're going to pay for these infrastructure improvements, and here's $2 million. Remember the old adage, give a fish to a family and they eat once, teach a family to fish and they eat for a lifetime. Once the circus leaves town, all of a sudden that track, those drivers, that race fan community, and the community itself are left with infrastructure improvements that most likely they couldn't afford. But now that safer barrier is going to save some hobby stock driver's life if he goes into it with a wide open throttle. So it's a win-win-win. And I think it's a conversation that we need to jumpstart and start to have. To NASCAR's credit, they encourage those type of conversations. Now, before you get called to the big red truck and be reminded that it's their sandbox and you're only playing in it because they thought it was okay for you to be part of the team.
Right. I people forget, and you were there, and I remember part of it, but a lot of people forget that when Winston come in, they originally went to Junior Johnson first, and Junior Johnson says, hey, this is way bigger than anything. He couldn't fathom spending that much money, I guess, And then, so he takes it to NASCAR. NASCAR then takes the sponsorship. But what a lot of people don't realize is how much money they put into those racetracks to make those tracks better.
Oh, well, I can give you a real quick accounting of how it worked. You're right about the Junior Johnson story. One of Junior's very best friends was Ralph Seagraves, who for years was at RJ Reynolds. And when RJ Reynolds decided that they wanted to spend some of that tobacco money, they went to Ralph and said, hey, Junior. And Junior says, look, This is way too much money. They got an airplane. They flew to Bill France Jr.'s office, and Bill Jr. and Senior and Jr. told him, said, look, this is far bigger than what I need. Not only do they sponsor the Winston Cup and back it up financially, but then, as you say, here's an accounting of what they would provide on an annual basis. Letterhead, custom printed with your local short track's name, part of the Winston Racing Series. I know that sounds minor, but it's not. It's overhead. All right. Paint. If you want to, there are still short tracks across America that still have red and white paint, because that's how much that NASCAR, through RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company, provided these short track operators. And they've been gone for what, a decade and a half? But here's the other thing.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing that they provided the short tracks. And that was a level of expertise. You remember the guys decked out in red and white, Winston paraphernalia that would patrol the Winston Cup garages? They had the same group, another group with the same type of an approach on the short tracks. So at Stafford Speedway, we had a relationship with the Winston Racing Series coordinator for our area, who then reported to the Winston Racing Series headman at RJ Reynolds. They provided you, if you had a question, if you had an event you wanted to tackle, they would lend their marketing expertise to it. Now, from an infrastructure standpoint, scoreboards. All right. Stafford Speedway just this winter has finally taken down the scoreboard that was provided to them free of charge as part of the Winston Racing Series Year 1 program. Hell, almost 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And they've replaced it with an LED digital, live screen, big screen TV. But Reynolds and Winston, they were up to whatever you may come up with. If it was good for the sport and you could convince them that it was good for your particular short track, they were all in. They were all in.
What so what was your first ever TV gig?
Wow. Well, let me see if I can take you back. I had pretty much I had done some film work for a lot of the back. This is way before your time, Aaron, when we would have to wait, a couple of months to get the highlight 16 millimeter film on the most recently completed Daytona 500 or Indy 500. And I knew the folks, and it was a family operator. I did voiceovers for them, but I had pretty much given up any shot at being on TV. I'd worked with Junior Johnson for a number of years, and with his backing and a technical alliance with him, had opened up my own marketing and public relations firm that then became the very first group to engage in what we call sponsors procurement for NASCAR teams, which was built around the business structure of just like if you were going to sell your house. And it was very lucrative, very rewarding. And one day I got a phone call, and it's very, very funny. It was, hi, is this Jack Arute? And I said, yes, ma'am. Hold on for Mr. Arledge. And I thought it was because everybody knew my dream. I'd done my stint at Motor Racing Network, and everybody, knew so I hung up the phone. I thought, and I said to my wife, all right, someone's yanking my crank. And I get the phone call back. No, Mr. Arute, this really is Mr. Rune Arledge's office. Will you hold? Okay. And it was Rune Arledge of ABC. And he said, we're sending a messenger to your house. We want you to come to New York City tomorrow morning for a meeting with me and the motorsports producer and director regarding the Indianapolis 500. I was flabbergasted. Okay. And sure enough, they showed up. They flew me up there. And the first question was, all right. And I came to find out afterwards, that was when Chris Economaki left ABC to go to work for CBS. So there was a vacancy, and they were interviewing a number of different people. But John Cooper, who had a history at NASCAR, and we got to know each other intimately there, but also was the current president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, said to the folks at ABC, you need to hire Jack Arute. So they asked me one question. They said, what would you do, Jack, if we asked you to go interview AJ Foyt. Well, I knew AJ from his NASCAR days with Hutchinson Pagan, and I didn't even think about it. I said, well, I'd go interview him. So then I got home that night, and I thought, well, that was fun. I got to see New York. I was living in Florida, and I get the phone call. We've decided to hire you on a week-by-week basis. We're going to be sending you an ABCY World of Sports blazer. We'll make your plane reservations. You're flying to Rossburg, Ohio in 2 weeks to be the pit reporter on the USAC National Championship Sprint Car Race at Eldora. I get excited even thinking about it when that yellow blazer showed up. Okay.
You still have it?
No. But it had the big embroidered patch on it. And you got to keep in mind, they were very explicit. You're working week to week. Okay. Right. So I had to figure out how to impact this opportunity. And look, I knew Tommy Bigelow. I knew Larry Rice. I knew a lot of the guys, and they were genuinely excited for me. So all of a sudden, next thing you know, these knuckleheads are scheming with an idea. They go, hey, they come to me and they go, we figured out how you can make, you heard me just complaining about making a name for oneself. So we figured out how you can get noticed, because this is live on Wide World of Sports. So they take me over to the USAC officials and they go, here's what we want to do. Can we have one extra practice? And we're not going to go fast, but a bunch of us want to go out on the racetrack under yellow while Jack's up by the cushion doing his stand-up in the open for the show. And USAC, again, they're excited. You got to understand, my dad was a life member of USAC. I traced my roots back to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And they go, sure, no problem. Just make sure that you all go on a slow speed. I should have known, right? So here's my throw from Al Michaels, and go down to our newest member, Jack Arute, and I do the report about the cushion. And if you want to go fast, you've got to get it right up here, but you got to be careful because here's the shelf. And if you're not careful, you go over the cushion, you're into the concrete wall. Just as I'm finishing and go back to you, Al, here comes those three knuckleheads, and I could hear them down the front straight. Oh, wow! They aren't going under caution. And they got sideways into the corner, and I looked down, and my entire yellow blazer was now orange from clay. But I did get noticed. So I did stand out. And that entire year, I went week to week. I would do an event like I did, and back then we went to Indy for a month. So each week I would wait for the phone call. And then at the end of that season, they said, look, we want to sign you to a full-time contract. I sold my marketing and PR firm, went full on into what turned out to be a long and terrific and really rewarding career that also extended into the world of college football and the NFL and Olympic sports. And I like to tell people I got to see the world on ABC's nickel.
We actually had Tom. We haven't released it yet. We had Tom on here, and I've known Tom since literally at the time I was born. My dad worked
one of the all-time greats. One of the all-time greats.
My dad worked for Carl Gilhausen on the sprint cars and that, and then he worked when Spike ran the IndyCar and all that. But I love Tom, and I'm very lucky to be able to still call him friend to this day.
I feel just as fortunate. And no matter where our paths cross, we all have a laugh and a chuckle about that day in Eldora, Ohio.
That's so funny. So you mentioned your parents. So how does your road really start? I mean, how do you kind of go from? I mean, obviously you had some background racing. If your dad was a lifelong member of USAC.
Yeah, I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and like my 6 boys and 1 girl. And as my father used to always say, point me out as being the oldest of 7. And he would end up by saying, and if you don't think it took guts to go on and have more after him. But he and his 2 of his very best friends in the late 40s, like a lot of, motorsports enthusiasts, they got bitten with the midget bug. And they built and campaigned a midget in the Northeast where you could run like 8 or 9 times in a week. Sometimes there were, afternoon, evening double headers at different racetracks. And then along came this thing called stock car racing. And they built and campaigned a flathead Ford powered stock car. And along the way, they were romanced by the Indianapolis 500 and used to ride the train out for the entire month of May.
Oh, wow.
So at a very young age, my dad was in the construction business. So at a very young age, I was perceptive enough to say, how am I going to, get his attention? Because during the summer months when he was working construction, it wasn't at home. He was always, the construction company, they account for a lot of, the major thoroughfares in the New York State Thruway and the interstate system. So he would go off to work, live in a house trailer or a trailer with some of his other, supervisory people. And then they would fly or drive home for the weekend. Well, Friday night was occupied with, divvying up all the punishments from all of the things that you did during the week. And then Saturday morning, my father would go off to the races. So I got smart. I knew if I was going to get his attention, I had to like what he liked. So while I played baseball and I played football and I was in the school plays, I started spending a lot of time studying racing. And it became kind of a unique to his death, something and a passion that we both shared. We'd spend winter months where he'd have the old Floyd Clymer yearbooks from the Indy 500, and he'd quiz me. All right, Jack, who drove the Belon Special last year? And so that's where it was instilled in me. And then as I grew older, they were becoming more and more successful in the modified racing ranks of the Northeast. And they made the jump to NASCAR with drivers like Eddie Flemke and Smokey Boutwell, won some track championships. But along the way, my old man said, look, this is my passion. This is my fun. If you want to get involved, you're going to have to figure out a way to get there yourself. Okay. Thanks, Pop. Appreciate it. Go win it tonight. And I did.
Can I at least tag along?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad he told me that way, because what I proceeded to do is I did make my own way. I walked into the local town newspaper and proclaimed that I was going to be their motorsports writer. And John Wentworth, who was the publisher, the editor of the sports page, laughed and gave me a press card. I was 14 years old. I used to ride the bus to the local track, Plainville Stadium, and sell ice cream. Well, at the age of 15, I got the job as the assistant flagman at the Stafford Speedway, where they raced on Saturday nights, the NASCAR Modifieds. Which, by the way, was where my dad raced. Now, we didn't drive up together. I'd have to hook a ride with someone else, but there I was up in the flag stand. And then when the flagman quit mid-season, now I'm 15, and I'm the flagman.
Oh, wow.
And to put it in perspective, I'm getting paid $75 cash at the payoff window every Saturday night. Now, in, mid-60s money, that's big money, right?
That's right.
Yeah. My dad, when they threatened and they announced they were going to close the racetrack, my dad, his brother, and the construction company leased with an option to buy the place. And I made the mistake 2 weeks into that lease option, sitting down at the breakfast table and saying, Dad, your announcers suck. My father slapped me up the side of the head and says, you think you can do any better? Get your fat butt up there Saturday night. You're fired. Okay. All right. So I go up in the announce booth and I kind of like it. I'm enjoying it. I'm working with guys, the late Jim Power and other people that are up there. So I go to the payoff window that night. Figure it's time to get paid my cash. Remember, just a week before, I was getting $75. I open the envelope and there's $25. I took a huge cut in pay, but I think I got even in the long run with my broadcasting career.
It was a tough go at first, though.
Yeah, right.
It's funny. I've said this a lot, but you can always tell like a big difference when someone in broadcasting is very passionate about something versus someone who's just assigned to an event because they work for that network. You see that a lot with the 500. They get people that, you can just tell they wouldn't be at the track if they didn't have the job, bottom line. So people like you always say Paul Page, because like I said, he's always at the track, whether he's getting paid or not. It just always adds something, I feel like, to the broadcast when the person is passionate about it.
Aaron, that goes back to what I was saying.
Right.
Excuse me. I had an assortment of career assignments at ABC, and I was equally passionate about all of them. And why? Because I was curious. I wanted to know more than just being assigned to it and bringing home a paycheck. You know, when I went to Altenburg, East Germany for the World Luge Championships, by the time I was done, they had me on a luge going down and totally understanding it and grasping it and, you know, deeply appreciating it. When Paul and I were dispatched to do the first ever Winter X Games super modified snow shovel races.
I just saw that video on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. And you want to talk about, you think in the early days of sprint car racing, those were death traps? Strap your butt in one of those things where your fanny's on the bottom of a snow shovel. But we wanted to understand it. We wanted to appreciate it. I have always thought it was incumbent on, if you get assigned to something, you know, you can just go there and phone it in, or like, you know, probably the greatest event I ever had the good fortune to cover was the Iditarod sled dog race. And I did that for almost 10 years. But when I first went there, I wanted to understand the nature of the musher, the relationship that he had for the dogs. So, you know, the Rick Swensons of the world and the Martin Boozers, they embraced me because they realized I wasn't one of those guys like you're referring to that shows up at Indianapolis just to punch the card and get the paycheck and, you know, just deliver lip service. And they let me in on the inside. They helped me to better appreciate it. Why did they open those doors? Because they saw me slogging through the 1,000 plus miles on snow machines and freezing out there along with them, so that I could understand what sleep deprivation was like and understand why, when it's 45 degrees below zero, your first responsibility is to bed down and feed your dogs. And then hopefully you might have a little bit of time for your own human needs. To me, that's always been the way and my method. And that's why, as I say, I don't care what I was assigned to. It could be yak screwing in Tibet. I still wanted to know what the yak was thinking.
Well, I hope that that's not an event you ever have to cover.
No, well, it came close. It was going to be an Olympic sport, and then they decided better of it because of the livestock and ASPCA issues that would be at hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with them on that one. I think they should leave that one.
Right. You're right. Exactly.
Behind the barn. You know, and we were just talking about the people who kind of come in and they may be good at they may be actually good at what they do, but as someone who has a deep passion for it, I think that I would never really have a respect for that person. I mean, have you ever run across that, where just people that are actually people you really like? Or
I fight the urge to be judgmental. Okay.
I got you. No, it makes sense.
Because a lot of times I don't know the backstory. Right. I don't know what's going on. You know, and I'll give you a classic example. You know, and I'm going to leave him nameless, but a very, very well-known top shelf TV personality gets assigned to the Indianapolis 500. Now he's bright enough and talented enough that, you know, for most of the viewing public, they don't even know that he feels like a fish out of water. But to those of us that would spend, you know, every day, you know, in the production trailers with him, we knew that he was like trying to drink water out of a fire hydrant. But I had a profound respect for the fact that he knew the abundance that he didn't know, but he wasn't too proud to either A, admit it, or more importantly, B, seek out others to try and help him accelerate. And when it was done, when we were done with the 3 or 4 years that he was there and he moved on to some other, you know, pressing sport at ABC, he left with an affinity for the Indianapolis 500 that to this day, every now and again, we'll cross paths on the front straightaway at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So there aren't as many as you might think that just want to phone it in. I think, quite honestly, there's a lot more of them that want to be able to use it as a tool to further their career.
Right.
And that I have a problem with.
Right. I can see that. I fully respect what you're saying there. I I think the 500 is such a, and I don't know why in this day and age auto racing has been covered on TV and exclusively for 50 plus years now, in different
Mhm.
forms, but it's not like it's not like it's a hidden sport. And I always find it interesting people who kind of go into it thinking it's one way, and then once they really experience, especially the 500, once they really experience something like the 500, they come away with a whole newfound respect for it.
I I tell people all the time. Eddie Cheever said it one time, and it resonated with me. He says the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a living, breathing organism.
Yep.
Agreed.
Tony Kanaan has shared with me, Jack, you don't win the Indy 500. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway chooses who will win. These are all these little snippets. And I've told my friends, and have been very fortunate, I have exposed folks that have an interest and have watched it on TV, and it was part of their Memorial Day traditions, along with hot dogs and, playing in the swimming pool, that until they go there, they can't have an appreciation for it. And I've been very, very blessed because over the 50 plus years that I've been there, both covering it and also being there as a fan, I felt very justified in saying, until you can stand there and be part of that breathing humanity, that massive humanity, you can't appreciate the monumental nature. I've done Super Bowls. I've done World Series games. I'm not boasting, but there is nothing that can hold a candle to the moments before they say, gentlemen, start your engines. And you can still hear echoing down the front straightaway the last refrain of Back Home Again in Indiana. That is just a uniquely iconic moment, and you don't have to be a race fan to appreciate it. The Mark Cuban, who's the president of the Dallas Mavericks NBA team. I got to, by happenstance, I ran into Mark when I was at ESPN Radio, and he goes, nice. Oh man, Jack, because I've watched you on ABC all the time with the Indy 500 coverage. And I go, what are you talking about, Cuban? Then we're going to talk about the NBA. And he says, no, dummy. He says, I went to IU. He says, we spent all 4 of my undergraduate years in the snake pit. And, I laughed. And so as I had more conversations with him, he says, I didn't know anything about auto racing. We went to the snake pit for the party. He says, but the beauty of the snake pit, as untoward as it may have been, as, don't look now, Ethel, as it may have had in terms of incidents, he says, a lot of us that were there, eventually we sobered up and we made notice of what was going on outside the fence, and we became fans. And I think that's something else that the Indianapolis 500 can lay claim to. There are probably half of the audience on TV, and I would even dare say half of the paying spectators, that the Indy 500 is the only IndyCar and most likely motorsports event that they either watch or attend each and every year. Well, that's a great missionary role to play. It's what the Busch Light Clash at the Coliseum is going to try and do. You're going right into the epicenter of the Latin American population, the Hispanic and Latinos in downtown LA. And you know what? They're not going there to see the race. They're going there to sing along with Armando and
Right.
lay down a little fireball. But along the way, they may see something and they go, "Holy cow!" I want to at least tune into the Daytona 500 in 2 weeks.
The Speedway, everybody has a different relationship with it. I have one that's different than Aaron's, and it's different from Paul's, and different than yours. But the one thing we can all agree on, there's this weird thing, and it doesn't matter what day it is. If it could be a Wednesday in August, you drive under those tunnels off 16th Street, and there's just something there, and you can't explain it, and you can't. It's
It's an aura. Yeah, it's
yeah.
an
I've
aura.
never
Absolutely.
been anywhere else in my life that's like that.
Well, because it's a shrine. All right.
Yeah.
It's a shrine to speed. It's a look. I thoroughly enjoy when I get to, when a corporate entity hires me to maybe host their hospitality area, or for years I've been part of ABC Supplies, Memorial Day weekend, Indy 500 festivities, and one of the things that I always talk about is the fact that once they go there once, they end up having the exact same feeling that you just described, and that me and you and Aaron have felt over and over again, like you say, when you go down and back up into there. And part of it is because if you really trace the history, it's where a collective group of ordinary men and women flocked each and every year to accomplish extraordinary acts and actions, and sometimes at a very dear cost. Okay. And in other times at a storybook ending, a Hollywood ending. And that's all when you can build over 100 plus years a book of those kind of stories. I would encourage your listeners, if they ever go to the Indianapolis 500 Museum, forget about, the displays are awesome. They're terrific. But just wander over in the outer lobby at the placard that's there that lists every driver that has ever started an Indianapolis 500. Last time I tallied it up, that's under 500 individual names over the course of more than a century. Simply to make that race. I get it. Nowadays, it isn't quite as difficult, but yet the journey is about the same. Maybe we don't have 85 entries for poll day, but we still have people that have had to scrape and claw and climb the ladder to get the opportunity. I just finished talking to Sage Karam, and he talked about that, about how, he's so grateful to Dreyer and Reinbold, for providing him, the one-off opportunities. And you talk to J.R. Hildebrand, a guy that's going to spend J.R. Hildebrand, I hope it's not true, but he had his one chance. And the Speedway decided not to let him win that year.
Right.
But that's going to haunt him.
All right. Unless every day.
Exactly. And unless he can write that, it's going to be no different than what Eddie Sachs took to his grave. I played a big role at the Indianapolis 500, but I never got to go to Victory Lane. And they're not the only two. There's thousands of
Lloyd
stories
Ruby.
like that.
Look at
Lloyd Ruby. Before Lloyd passed
Roberto
away.
Guerrero.
Yeah, another good one. Yeah. But before Lloyd passed away, I used to have fun in the Legends Lounge with him, because, again, 1969 was my first year to attend the Indy 500 with my dad. And where we were sitting, there was Lloyd Ruby. He was out front, as you know, came in for his last pit stop. And remember, that's when you had like 150-gallon fuel tank, 75 on each side, and they hooked the hoses up, and Lloyd gets a little excited, and it pops out of gear. The clutch pops out, and it lurches forward and ruptures the tank. And as 75 to 150 gallons of methanol is oozing down that concrete on pit road, here comes Mario Andretti to take the lead, and eventually wins his first and only Indy 500. And when Mario was sideways during the IRL and the IndyCar feud, we were sitting there one night, and I said, "It's all your fault, Lloyd." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's all your damn fault. We wouldn't have to put up with Andretti if you hadn't been so eager to get out onto the racetrack after you took on the fuel, that you had to bump the car and you ruptured the fuel tank. Next thing you know, the little guineas win in the race." And I go on, but and Lloyd is in hysterics. But even funnier is Johnny Boyd and some of the others. They pick up on it. The next thing you know, the entire remainder of the month of May, it's all your fault, Lloyd. So, there's a lot of great little stories like that.
Yeah, man, it's crazy he never won the 500.
He-
So you've had this amazing run. I mean, I can't working at Wide World of Sports alone would be a week's worth of conversation. I'm sure. I mean, it has to be amazing. You've had this amazing run. Um, kind of take us through and then you went through the big boom period of NASCAR, and then things as they do, they start coming back down to earth a little bit. Kind of take us into where you kind of are today, but how you start transitioning, kind of where you are today.
Well, it's an easy answer. All right. When you get the phone call from your agent and he says, you know what, they've decided not to renew your contract. Okay.
Right.
Which it happens to all of us. But I was very fortunate because while I was still working, with a contract on television, I also had begun a return to my roots, and that was with the emergence first of ESPN radio. And I was a regular on there, and it made for some long days because I was the host on the weekends of the post-game locker room while I was on the road, by the way. So I'd be done with an IndyCar race or a NASCAR race and have to find a nearby radio station that I could hook up back to, Bristol, Connecticut, and do my show from 12 until 3 in the morning.
Wow.
I had just been up and down, but then along came Sirius XM radio. And Steve Cohen, who's the executive vice president of sports, to be honest with you, courted me and said, here's what our concept is. And at this point in time, everybody didn't have a Sirius XM radio. A lot of cars were coming with it. You got your free trial. But you got to remember, this is 15 years ago when it first hit the market. And I jumped and went there and feel very proud of the fact that, I was able to, find a home and Steve shared with, as I do, the importance of telling stories. And, that became one of the cornerstones to what it was, whether it was ESPNU radio, with college football or the NFL channel or NASCAR, what have you, that, you wanted more than just, hear the latest, racing results from East Overshoe, Nebraska. And I got reconnected with my roots, and that's my family's racetrack. And, retirement sucks. I'll be the first to admit it. But along the way, I came to realize that there's still a lot that I can do that I enjoy doing. And, my appearances on Sirius XM NASCAR radio, I look forward to them. I thoroughly enjoy it. You move over to, Brick by Brick on IndyCar Racing Weekly with guys like Tony Kanaan or the Dinger, or, you have it, just because I stay in touch, as I say, giving speeches and stuff. But then along came my Wind Tunnel podcast series. And I got to be honest with you guys, I resisted it. I had people, close friends of mine, and people in the industry saying, Jack, you've got such a wealth of knowledge and an abundance across so many disciplines. Why don't you share it? And like, what are you talking about? He says, well, why don't you start a podcast? And I said, well, why don't I learn to fly an airplane? I got no clue. Don't even understand any of this. We'll help you. Well, believe it or not, guys, it was 2 years in the making. Because one of the things that my podcast is, and I'm proud of this, is different than a lot of them is I wanted to take what I was comfortable with, and that's what I call a radio type format, where you have production value with music beds, and when you do features and things of that nature, and when a particular guy that you're interviewing refers back to 1967, when it airs on the podcast, you've got the little sound effect, and next thing you know, you're hearing Bob Jenkins talking about the incredible finish at Cleveland by this newcomer named Chip Ganassi, whatever it might be. So I put a lot of production value into it. And I have been very fortunate because I've been embraced by the industry. And I'm not talking about the broadcasting or podcasting industry. I've been embraced by the industry of motorsports. We did 36 episodes in season 1, and our guest list ranged from Mario Andretti and Richard Petty to Jimmy Johnson to if he was a newsmaker in NASCAR or IndyCar or in IMSA, he had a time and a stint on our show. And it wasn't, well, what was it like to run Daytona? It was more, again, that dedication I have, wanting to understand what makes them tick. Were the sacrifices that they put up with, were they worth it for what you got in return? Talking to Kyle just before Young Money wins his first Cup championship, and having him get very emotional when he recounted, when he got that, when he realized almost immediately what he had done and what had happened, and he doesn't want to talk a lot about it, but all of the things that he did to right that perceived wrong, that stretched well beyond what the NASCAR mandated formula to return to good graces required, and how it changed he and his bride's life forever. And so that, to me, I'm really proud and passionate about. And this season 2 will be 39 weeks in length. And overall, on the average, we drop once a week. And again, it will focus on newsmakers, but also feature you stories like one I brought my listeners of a guy that had been racing at a local short track in Texas for more than 50 years. And he had won more than his share of races. But as he got up into his mid-60s, he suffered an illness that cost him first the use of his left leg, requiring amputation. He raced for a couple more years and the disease returned, and they had to amputate his right leg. So now he has no legs, and he's still turning a race car on the short tracks of America and winning. But he fabricated not a set of hand controls, but a set of paddles where the nubs of his legs, and having him explain the passion that drove him to do that, and how, were it not for that Saturday night and Sunday night action at the local racetrack, he would have cashed in his chips, because he had become such a depressed individual until his racetrack friends said, "Hey, what are you doing sitting around here wasting away? Get your ass out of the bed and let's go to the racetrack." That, to me, is the stories that I like to bring to my listeners.
Man, that's
we
great.
had so we had Mark James on. One thing that he talked about was he never really develops relationship with drivers, because he feels like it, I don't know, like messes up the integrity kind of the broadcast. Like, all the years of being a pit reporter, and just, being around racing, did you establish relationships with drivers, or did you kind of feel the same way?
With all due respect to Mark, I disagree with him. Look, we're like a circus family. All right. Just because the drivers, maybe they're the lion tamers, and maybe the TV cameraman, maybe they're the guys that put up the tent, and God only knows what we reporters are. We're probably the clowns or the monkeys, but we're all family, and we all go from place to place to place. If it's a very lonely world on the road, if you can't seek and embrace and enjoy other people that are part of your family. So yeah, I have to this day a lot of great, very long-standing relationships with drivers and car owners and mechanics, and it's a situation for me that I know the lines, and there are times when I have crossed that line, but overall, again, it goes back to, I'm not a journalist. I'm part of the circus. I'm here to put on a show, and that to me is of the utmost importance. So, and I respect Mark if that's the way he wants to go about it, but that hasn't been the way I've pursued my career.
I think in a way you more grew up with it than maybe he did, although he worked at, like he did stuff at Terre Haute and some other local stuff later on when he was a little bit older, older teen or whatever. I think when you grow up in it, around it, it's a little different than if you're coming to it from the outside.
That's quite possible. All right.
You know,
But again, we all have to carve
sure.
out for each of ourselves what is most comfortable for us. That I'm not advocating that mine's the only right way. You
Sure.
know, Mark has done a terrific job. And you talk about stepping into the breach.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, the worst thing in the world is to be the guy that replaced the guy that replaced the guy that replaced Sid Collins. Okay.
That's right.
So
Right, exactly.
it's, you know, so I respect Mark for his body of work and for the way he goes about it. I just never really looked at it that way.
Isn't there a beauty to that there's still a direct line to Sid Collins through that they still, you know, they share, you know, each person's kind of shared their role, you know,
Eh,
and they've changed their role a little bit, but there's still a lot of that goes back to Sid.
well, I think for those of us that even know who Sid Collins is, you know, because there's now what, 3 generations since his passing. So that may have been applicable for certainly the first generation and the second generation. But I think there's far more people that know the impact that Bob Jenkins had than a Sid
Well,
Collins had.
I think more what I meant is there's still elements of Sid in those people because they've all kind of passed it down.
Oh,
They've all learned from each other.
yeah, I
That's
would
what
say
I meant.
I would agree, but by the same token, with the advent of, you know, the extensive, nonstop, pervasive coverage on television and on the various, you know, Peacock channel, USA, whatever it may be, where you can get everything. You know, you can have Townsend Bell, you know, for breakfast. It's just so the role of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network, I won't say it's diminished, but it has changed. You know, that was where we all flocked for an event because that's the only place we got the immediate word pictures, whether it was Freddie Agabation with his gravelly voice or, you know, Sid Collins or, you know, Lou Palmer. You know, the names are, you know, they're ingrained in my memory as a kid.
Sure.
Nowadays, with the advent of the television coverage, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Network has not necessarily taken a back seat, but it isn't the be all end all that it once was. So its position in the pecking order for today's fan is far different than it was for guys like me and you.
Sure. No, I understand that.
Was so obviously you were most known for kind of being the pit reporter. Was that something that you always, I don't know, wanted to do, or did you ever think about like you'd rather be in the booth?
Oh, I entertained it. I mean, you know, anybody that's worth their salt, they want their shot, and I had my shot. I did more than my share of that, but I found that it was probably the most distressing times of my broadcasting career, and here's why. I wanted to be where the action was.
Sure.
Okay. I'd get up there in the booth, and I was our pit reporters and our producers' worst freaking nightmare, because I wanted to know, well, what was going on here and what was going on there. And during the commercial break, it was, hey, have so-and-so go over here and ask such and such a question. And it was like, relax, Jack. It's not your role. Okay. I wasn't comfortable with it. I wanted, you know, to be right there. And there was, again, that juice that I felt. I had my shots. I mean, I'll never forget being up in the booth with Paul and Scott Goodyear, and when Buddy Rice finally delivered a victory to Ray Hall Letterman Racing, you know, in the rain. And it was and continues to be, I don't know if you know this, historically, the longest nonstop television presentation of any sporting event in America. We were on for almost 12 consecutive hours. It had gotten to the point that we had emptied our saddlebags to the point where we were resorting to things like, well, let's get a set of Nomex gloves and let's set them on fire while Jack's wearing them. Okay. So we're done. We're off the air. We're all three of us are exhausted as we're wrapping up our headset and just go, man, I need to go, you know, go to the restroom. In comes 2 yellow shirts. You got to get out immediately. And we're like, what are you talking about? Get under in the tunnel. There's a tornado coming. And I'll never forget Paul Page looking up and saying, I don't care. Come take me. It can't be any worse than the last 10 hours I had.
Well, I think the story he told us, Scott, was I think it's something about eating steak, right?
Yeah, he said he went down to the thing. He said he went down to the hospitality tent later on.
Yeah. No, in the steak dinner.
He said he said there was nobody there. He said it was great. He said there was about 3 or 4 inches of water on the ground. He said other than that, it was great.
Well, you got to understand, just as I said, yeah, all right, we followed the instructions, but let me tell you, after 10 hours being in an easy bake oven, basically, we went through the motions, but we didn't even give a damn about a tornado. We just wanted to get back to the compound. So you're right. When we got there, okay, nice and quiet, lots of food that was still warm.
That's what he said.
Exactly. But you had to walk across Lake Lloyd to get to it.
He said if he had to do it over again, he would have took a bunch of those steaks home with him. He said he didn't even think about it.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah.
So one thing with being a pit reporter, like you said, you were where the action was, and I guess what's part of that is interviewing people after they get out of the race or get in an accident.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, you're interviewing people that probably aren't very happy, probably not happy to talk to anybody. I mean, were there a lot of situations that, I don't know, you just felt like kind of awkward, like being there and talking to them?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say that at the time I felt awkward, because at the time I was interested. I wanted to know. They were my friends. Consider the month that Tony Stewart had when he was teamed up at Menards. Only to have Scotty Brayton, gamble it, put it on the pole, and only to lose his life. And then this is a young Tony Stewart that goes out and leads the Indianapolis 500, only to, have those Menards engines fail. And I didn't even think twice about it when I said, with everything you've been through, Tony, can you describe your feelings right now at this moment? And he looked me straight in the eye and he says, I feel like the track just SHIT on me. Didn't need to say anything more. Okay. So it's, I can't ever say, I think there's been moments where, I inadvertently may have put somebody in a compromising position, but it hasn't been by design, and it hasn't been, to meet some personal need. But I've had some incredible moments when Al Jr. in tears, and it became part of the opening to Wide World of Sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. When this, young Al Jr. looks up with tears in his eyes and says to me, "You don't know what Indy means."
And to me, that's one of the most iconic moments
Yeah,
of the Indy 500.
I think they should have that on somewhere in that facility. I think that should be put up somewhere.
And as I say, that's, so to be part of that, and I have never forgotten, as I said, what Jim McKay gave me is the early advice. Just be who you are. All right. Sure. And I have an inquisitive nature. I am a bit of a contrarian. I do want to know what makes you tick. I want to know what motivates you. So, when you take all of those individual ingredients and you put them in the stew pot, you do come out with a pretty good meal.
Sure.
I agree with that. Jack, I mean, honestly, I could talk to you for days. And hopefully you I know you're very busy with your own show and that. Hopefully you can come back on sometime.
Listen, I'd love to. As we get a little closer to the Indy 500, it might bear revisiting some of it.
Well, thanks again, Jack.
Hi, guys.
I've said this to others before. But I don't know if I understood it as much as, especially after speaking to you today. I mean, you have like this. You can really tell your enthusiasm comes through when you speak, and when you talk. And you could just, it's genuine, and I think that's what I've always liked about you all these years.
Well,
I never really understood it, I don't think I really understood it till today. I just knew I liked listening to you talk, but I really understand it better today.
Well, I
And
appreciate
thank you so much
that.
for coming on.
My
Yeah.
pleasure. Take
All right,
care.
see ya.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.